So we're going to describe the third type of real property interest, real estate interest for a transfer deed to the trust, which is this first option here. We've already discussed and explained how the concepts of outright ownership, partial interest work in conjunction with filling out this transfer deed for transferring a client's property into their living trust. Now we're going to discuss joint tenancy interest with other individuals. And what that means is other than the clients, other individuals equals other people than the client. So if the clients hold ownership, whether it's a registered domestic partnership, a same-sex couple, non-traditional couple, a married couple, if they hold ownership as joint tenants with no one else on title, then the correct option to choose here is outright ownership. Outright ownership includes single individuals or joint tenancy for the couple alone. Joint tenancy interest with other individuals is when there's a joint tenancy, but there are additional people on title other than in this case, husband and wife or their domestic partners. And so whenever we have that particular scenario, it's a little trickier, a little more tricky, as it could be sensitive. It could be a situation where a property tax reassessment could occur if this is not evaluated properly and assessed correctly on our end, on my end. That's my job. That's one of my jobs, is to make sure that I do my due diligence when I'm creating these transfer deeds. And if we break a joint tenancy with a third individual that's on as a joint tenant with the husband and wife, and that individual was added to title after the husband and wife initially bought the property. For example, husband and wife bought the house in 2000 as joint tenants. Husband and wife as joint tenants. Then 5 years later, they wanted to refinance. So they couldn't qualify. They needed a cosigner. Escrow and the lender required the cosigner to also be on title, so they added that individual as a joint tenant. So the old joint tenancy created a new joint tenancy with now 3 individuals as joint tenants. If we then now, 20 years later or 21 years later, break that joint tenancy by separating out the husband and wife's 2/3, remember, because there's 3 people on title, then that will break the joint tenancy, and now the property will be reassessed as if that person received 1/3 of the property. Initially, when the husband and wife as joint tenants added a third person as a joint tenant, there was no reassessment. In California, you're allowed to create a new joint tenancy. The original owners, the original transfers are allowed to create a new joint tenancy, adding someone as a joint tenant, and it doesn't trigger a reassessment until that third that was designated for that third person added is separated out via tenancy in common. And that's essentially what's happening when you separate the husband and wife's 2/3 into their living trust. It becomes a tenancy in common, and that breaks the joint tenancy. That triggers a reassessment of 1/3 of the property. So we have to watch out for that kind of stuff. That'll be my job to confirm whether or not that potential scenario would exist or would apply. So just do your job in collecting the information and designating the type of property, type of real estate interest that the clients want to transfer to their trust, and I'll do the rest on my end. But let's just assume that the clients are going to put their share into this living trust, and they're going to leave that third person on. The only time that will not trigger a reassessment when there's a couple and then a third person on title is when they all bought the property together at the same time. So that property already designates 3 owners since the purchase. The property tax base was determined at the purchase, and that was set in stone. 3 owners, equal shares. So at that point, when now you transfer the husband and wife's 2/3 share into their trust, because that property tax base already assessed 1/3 ownership for each person, there will not be a reassessment. Okay, so in that situation, we're good. So let's just say husband and wife owns the property in both names, and essentially the same fields pop up where you've got to enter each spouse's name on title. Don't worry about entering the other person, the other joint tenant's name or information. We'll figure that out when we get the deed. Answer the question, are the clients the only individual on title? And of course, because you're choosing this option, it should be no. Okay. And it's mentioning here now, by executing this transfer, the joint tenancy will be severed. It'll be broken. And we mentioned here that now it'll be a tenancy in common, and it could trigger, okay, not always, but it could trigger a reassessment. So we point that out. Make sure you acknowledge that you enter the client's names correctly as they appear currently on title on the grant deed or the latest transfer deed that exists for that property. Is it primary residence, parcel number, the actual address, county, city, upload a property tax bill. In this case, it would be important, a little more important to upload a property tax bill because we want to verify 3 people on title that would show on the property tax bill. And then we have a quick claim deed, enter legal description. Okay, so that pretty much covers the property transfer into a trust and the different types of title vesting or real estate interest vesting that exist primarily these days when we deal with transferring a client's property or portion of their property, their interest of the property into a trust. We will then move to the next type of deed that we're going to be dealing with, and that's the affidavit of death of joint tenant.